So we are good. Cash sent that over. Did you want? Which do you?
Why don't we do the full
Summary? Or the words? The words first. So,
I'll put it up, I think the link's not up yet.
It's on. I just watched it. Me too.
color time too, right? So y'all sent us over a package. We put all of our changes into your same format, just so we can keep them all together. So we just mocked up some changes. For the most part, everything I think has been on the table up to now. I think because of that kind of error that occurred with the field being deleted out of some of the promotions, that it really caused my team to do a lot of thinking, because I think when we were at the table last, we saw quite a bit of dialogue about what we thought that your intention was, and that that's not something that we had heard. It made us start thinking a lot about crossovers. And so we just wanted, and we realized that we hadn't as fully interrogated that. And so we didn't fully change the language, but we just wanted to have a conversation about it at the table, because we're not sure that it's really what y'all, now we realize that we're not sure what the intention was, and that we thought we knew what the intention was, but now we're not sure that your language gets us there. So we just want to talk about it. But anyway, so scroll through. I think the first is this, no changes here. We returned the special, so basically most of the language just reflects what is in our current offer. So it destacks the special operations, integrated services, communications, ACS, and certification pay for PL6s or extended scope paramedics. We added administrative positions for the strict differential, because that's what's current practice. That's what was reflected in the segment that he already pulled for us. So we just wanted to make that clear. We accepted your language about readiness. We took out one sentence that just says the section shall not be subject to the grievance process set forth in this agreement. We really do appreciate your effort to see what we're trying to do and understand that we have the same goals in mind, but we think that if it's in the contract, it should be subject to grievance. So we removed that. We did agree with your change about removing the workload and schedule. We hear what you're saying about management rights, and we appreciate the intention of the conversations that we've been having with Chief about moving comm to 24s, having some pilots that I know there are conversations about, and moving those folks in that direction. So the rest of this just reflects what is. We accepted all your language and sick leave donation. I think we share the same goals for this paragraph. We went back to original language here. We added in language for the leave buyback program. Most of this language comes directly from Fire's leave buyback program. The gist is that it will include $300,000. And it will be first come, first served in the last year of the contract, just so that we just have a 1-year experiment on it, just to see if it's being used, what the right level is. If nobody wanted to buy back, then we have budgeted this amount and then nobody wanted to use it. So we just wanted to do a little pilot in the last year of the language. Similar to Fire, it allows a window and then a cutoff date. Theirs being October 1 and April 1. And we actually turned it into a window so that people who wanted to use the leave buyback program, it would just be open between September 1st, 2026 and October 1st, 2026. That's when they can elect to do it. The reason why we did this is because since it is a pilot program and not a continual program, this is our way of capturing that. And then each person can buy or sell 24 hours total time. You have to maintain at least 192 hours in your sick bank. Fire has the similar requirement. And we did continue with their program of it's available 2 different months, but the capped amount is still the same. And then, of course, if you receive sick leave, you are not eligible to sell that back. And then basically the process is the department creates a digital form. You submit it between September 1st, October 1st, first come, first serve. It's paid out November, in the first November paycheck. And that is consistent with what Fire's language is. Any immediate questions about that?
No, we'll take a look at it.
So promotions, I wanna, so this is something, we really deep dive into this. I really don't think you'll have an issue with this new language. But basically, one experience we heard about, and we really hear your effort about trying to help people promote, as soon as is reasonably possible as an effort of retention and recruitment, and we're balancing those things with retention. One way we thought we could accomplish your goal is by allowing for this language. So right now, our external and internal paramedic students, external paramedic students, as well as people who come in with just their EMT basic, or come in as a paramedic, but they haven't, gotten their Texas license. So if I'm a medic and I want to promote to clinical specialist, before the written test, I have to both be cleared to independent duty and have my licensed paramedic certification from DSHS. We have had times for our internal paramedic students that they have finished the program, taken national registry, applied for their DSHS certification, and there can be up to a 6-week lag. And that has made some people ineligible to sit for that promotional test. And so what we're trying to capture here is people who have passed national registry and have submitted for their DSHS certification before the written test date. And so that way they will most certainly have their official Texas licensed paramedic before the actual paramedic program starts. That's all that language does, but it is new. We were thinking of other ways that we could compromise with some of your requests. Does that make sense?
It does. I understand what you're trying. I think it's really get from a legal standpoint, but
Yeah.
I understand what you're trying.
And everything else in these, we added another area, not here, but under captains, but we have meant to.
Slow down. There's a lot of these little cleanup things that were in blue from like 2 or 3 sessions ago when Roxy had done cleanup, for example. You did the education part. Well, there's a lot of little cleanups that are still blue. And I'm wondering if y'all had
We don't, we just,
have looked at those or still looking at those, or just have not turned them green, but they seem,
we have not done them, but they seem to be okay.
not a promise, but yeah, that's exactly what I was
Well,
saying. Like little things like this
Right.
one, that at the time they were expressed were actual cleanups versus, except for the one.
Yeah,
Which I'm aware of,
I think we have crossed out anything that we disagree.
Okay.
There's one section where we haven't fully reworked it because we wanted to have a conversation about it, but for the most part, if we didn't cross it out, that it is acceptable. Yeah, it's just,
And this is fine, I just wanted to make sure there weren't other issues still hanging there that we're not talking about that are little issues, but still.
so, y'all have not put the 90-day window in the captain's language. And so we had added it to both the captain sections, and we just wanted to bring it up, and we weren't sure if that was intentional or if it was just, there's so much language.
Well, it was intentional, but I don't believe it was something we felt very strongly about. When we discussed it internally, our recollection was that we didn't have a problem with this particular test, so we had only put it in the standards, is that right? But that wasn't like because it was a strong feeling of ours, I believe. I mean, we can rediscuss it and make sure that this is good, but I don't think, I think it was intentional, but just from memory.
Yeah, because I think all of our examples were about clinical specialists promoting the captain.
Okay, so we may have had it in the.
Yeah, but I mean, we want it for both. I think we've had a lot of internal conversation about it, and I think the most important thing is what Chief Gardner said in the subcommittee, which is the intent is to also just be intentional about when the dates are, so that there aren't some custom.
Yeah, we will take a look at this, but I do not believe that that's going to be a problem. We'll check it out.
So all of this is agreed to, and yeah, so a final, that is agreed to, we just hadn't changed it. This is your language that we also agreed to. So the one addition we have, you'll see below, so we actually never put in the 70-point cutoff, and so we added that in. We have the cutoff for the written, and then we didn't have it for assessment center, so we just added that in. But that, I believe that's what we had, that was the intent, we had discussed that many times.
I believe so too. But we'll let that and confirm, but I think you're exactly right. Yes, a very good catch. I will think all that.
So then there should be nothing different for Vanderfield, captain or commander.
Same.
The only place we didn't add that is for the clinical specialist because it already had in the written score the cutoff language. We went back to our original language of 6 division chiefs. We had stated that, we were open to compromising on the division chief language at our previous conference. that we've sent to the
Okay, so you're not willing to give on the division chiefs with your current offer? Okay. I'll state it again, just for the record, that is a deal killer. Absolutely.
Y'all sent over this language. We just made this a little bit broader, so it's still that there has to be reimbursement, but we just included other language to talk about contract, memorandum of understanding, interlocal agreement, or some other agreement. We recognize that there are some entities that, if they know that it's going to be reimbursed, or if the expectation is that it's going to be reimbursed, that they might not offer it, and so we try to make it. That's the feedback that we received. So we wanted to talk about the crossover transfer. When we had talked about it, I don't think our team had fully appreciated what this meant. We thought y'all were trying to solve an issue, and we're not sure it does. What we heard, so tell me what y'all are trying to solve with this, is that there are some positions that communication folks are not eligible for, those being like PIO, safety, because those are classified as field positions. And so we think this is supposed to solve that and also generally make it easier to transfer between the two. I think that our challenge is that if there's a reason why we left it at clinical specialist, and also because, you know, it's a huge departure from civil service to change this. Civil service original language says that if you want to switch over divisions, you start from the beginning, and so we said you can start from clinical specialist, you can transfer to clinical specialist. Is that if every level above that, captain, commander, and higher in the actual field, not necessarily in the administrative positions, if somebody from communications as a commander wants to transfer to the field, they would have to get their PL5, their paramedic ability to practice as a paramedic in the system, which is their PL5. They would also have to be field training certified, and then be qualified to be a commander, meet all the qualifications to be a commander in the field. I think that is virtually impossible in a lot of ways. But the other thing is that they would have not had to have any experience as a field paramedic, cleared to independent duty in order to become a commander in the field. And I just don't think that's an outcome that the city was really thinking about or wants from a practical standpoint. And the vice versa is true. If a field commander wanted to lateral into communications as a commander, they could do that with no communications experience at all, and that just doesn't make sense to be to be a commander over that division when they have no experience being a line person in that division. And so I think we just wanted to revisit with y'all and see what the intent was and make sure that, you know, y'all had thought about all of those things first.
The language in number 2 is new language, so
It's not new language, it's going back to old language until we understood what the intent is.
that's going back to old language. And we didn't mark this document very well.
Like I said, this is the one where we just put that in red and then we didn't change all of the clinical specialists because there's so many different clinical specialists. that y'all switched to uniform staff and non-appointed position. We didn't change everything because I just wanted to mark it as a conversation as to why we're doing this.
So this is taking number one and then extricating clinical specialists from that and making it a paragraph to treat that a little bit differently. Is that what you're doing there?
No, the original language had 1 and 2 in it. It just, when it, in 1, it basically was really referring to clinical specialists.
Okay, we'll take a deeper dive in our covers.
Yeah.
We may understand it when we have a, can
Yeah.
actually look at it better. I
If y'all know what
should.
intent is, or was for the crossovers, can you tell us? So we can-
So one of the things that the chief has been specifically interested in is recruiting and retention. Part of what we discussed is the ability to recruit experienced people who may already be supervisors, training officers, things like that, and being able to move into their positions. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is that we have, at times, some people who are interested in moving into other divisions and basically having a pathway to that in terms of retention. So, also use some examples. We may not want to work in field life anymore, and may want to still stay with the department and maintain their tenure with the department, maintain their ability to advance in the department, but in a different subject. So that's really just, tackling it from two different ways of being able to recruit people who have experience in different things as possible.
I mean, but, so can y'all walk us through, if somebody in communications with the commander wants to transfer and be a field commander, like what that would look like, and do we think that that's okay, that they have no experience driving
Well,
ambulance?
I think there's a couple of things with that. Many of the things that you said are 100% true. They would have to be a paramedic. They would need to be credentialed to the minimum DL5 level. As far as the supervision, there are some tenets that are just basic to being a commander, being a supervisor, to leading people that are going to be true in the intersection. So that part I don't think is too much of a leap, but the technical skills and those abilities, those are the things that are going to have to be required to.
So when you look at her language on, forget that it says clinical specialist, but would it always be true that if you're wishing to transfer divisions, you must meet the minimum qualifications for whatever position in whatever division
That's correct.
it's in?
And the way that has been applied in some other transfers between divisions is that meeting the minimum qualifications, things like in communications, there is additional assessment before moving into that. And so there's some things that they have to do to do that, just like it's certainly more ominous thing or more I guess the timeline and all the commitment and everything is more on the field side with all the things that get into those spots that they do have to meet. And
So is there any difference in your mind, Chief Gardner, between a clinical specialist having to have the qualifications, and let's just say you're moving from comm to the field, because that's the most obvious, right? So you're moving from comm to the field. Is there a difference in your mind between clinical specialist moving from comm to field and having to meet those qualifications versus a commander moving from comm to field and having those qualifications that person?
Well, as you move through the ranks, there are additional training and qualifications you require on each side that have to be. So, for example, the captain, it is what she's talking about, because that's and training and all this, so they have to be, at least that part first. And then moving into, but again, it's the same thing. If you're a commander in communications and you have credentials and you have an EMT basic, and you would not be eligible to make your position in the
So our intent with this language is to have it for all of the different levels, not just clinical specialists, but also hold them to the requirements of that particular position. Okay. does that tell you our position on this? I think the language you have is not something we would agree to. I think we would agree to including the eligibility for that position sort of language, which I think we're accomplishing something. Not 100% sure,
It's really, I think it's assumed, it's just,
not in.
no, I mean, not, it's not explicit, but I think our issue is that from a practical point of view, having somebody who has never driven an ambulance, who has never, trained a paramedic, was never worked in that position, to then have a supervisor like that. Whereas right now, everybody who is a field commander, has gone through the process of working on an ambulance, being a field trainer, and then becoming.
So it sounds like we do have an at odds position of you think this is appropriate only for clinical specialists, meaning that and not for the higher.
Because we think that if, when you're crossing over into clinical specialist, that is on equal footing in the sense that there are many clinical specialists that also have no experience or very little experience being on an ambulance. And so it makes sense that if a communications person were to transfer over, it's a relatively entry-level step. But then captain and commander are much higher and require a different level of competency. So for captain, for example, if a communications captain came over into the field, they really would not know, except for the fact that they would have had to pass scenarios in a doctor interview. They would never have had to actually work on an ambulance, and then they're training other people how to work on an ambulance. And same thing from the field to communications, they would be training providers on how to be a dispatcher, how to be call taker, but they would have no experience doing that.
Next question. Currently, with the current contract language, the way it's working before we're talking about any of these changes, what is the union's understanding of how you can be promoted once you transfer division? Say, Commander Tom goes to Commander Field, do they, and that takes a year, right? It's like a year requirement for the transfer division.
The contract language does not allow for that.
Okay, so, so there's no current contract language that allows for that, but at any point, you're gonna have to be in that field position 2 years before you can promote, right, to commander or captain. You would work.
So if you were a operations commander, you would have to demote to a clinical specialist field and then of that.
Okay.
We have had we have had one example of a communications clinical specialist who did not have his paramedic, and so he demoted to become a medic in the field.
Okay.
Because the requirement to be in communications under EMT basic, which is the same to be a medic in the field. And so anybody can currently demote into the field as a medic position. But this is saying that in order to, do clinical specialist, captain and captain, they would have to be much higher.
Lateral rank. Okay, so I will say we do differ on this, and I think it's interesting that you've chosen the two things that you know are the chief's top two priorities and taken them away in this current offer. But certainly discuss it.
Again, this came up because of that error that y'all had, and then it caused us to do a deeper dive.
I agree.
And I want y'all to just think about the ramifications of having somebody train in a different division that they've never had experience in.
We hear you, we will discuss it, but as
There's no change in the voluntary crossover or crossover position. So, the next change we have is in reappointments. So if you scroll down, we accepted your language about less than 2 years. Scroll down again. We wanted to talk about the greater than 2 years. So we know that in our original language, we talked about 5 years or greater for reappointments getting time and grade, for pay only, not for seniority. And Katie costed that out. And we had a conversation with Katie in the room. She had made some assumptions about how many people. We kind of explained that, you know, just sharing about what we thought was a more appropriate number. We really traditionally don't get very many. If you look at the history, we did a information request asking Chief Gardner how many people are being reappointed, and really don't see that many at all. And so we talked about lowering that number. Another information request that we did is how much it costs to train somebody. And we did do that for other reasons, because we just wanted to think about how expensive it is to train somebody and why obviously retention is so important. So we have some of those numbers, so I just wanted to share them and see if we could come to an agreement on this, because in some ways we, by putting this language, we almost think we should be credited with money, because it's so much more expensive to train somebody than it is to reappoint somebody, because when we reappoint somebody, they don't have to go through the academy. They have a much simpler clearance process that is similar to ones that people who have never left the field go through. And so Kim actually pulled up numbers from the information request that we sent over, and I just want her to share a little bit about the numbers. And as a reminder, when Katie costed this out, and I know these were just estimates, she had costed it out at about $6,000 per person to put them in the stuff that they came from, as opposed to the starting pay. And so Kim, what was,
Can you hold up?
Yeah.
Tell me first, where does our language differ here? I'm just trying to figure out exactly what the difference is.
So what you had said is that if they have 2 or more years in this department, they would come back at year 2 for pay. And so we're saying, again, that we think they should come back at the year that they came in, or that they left as. So if they have 5 years in the department, they should come back at year 5.
Okay, and how far are you going back on this?
I don't think we have more than, I can look at, I believe my recall is like 20 people. In total in the department. I think the records only go back to 2013.
So you want to go back to the beginning of time, basically, if they're reappointed, if
To,
they've ever left.
to what HR records have. We're not asking HR to do any additional work than that they've done.
There's no expiration on it, so in other words, if you left 10 years ago, you could come back.
They can only come back through the reappointment clause if they left less than 2 years ago. Or had, or 3 years if they did EMS. And, you know, it still is chief discretion whether or not to reappoint somebody. So, I'm gonna read Chief Gardner's email. The reappointment records in HR only go back to 2015. There have been a total of 20. And I know at least a few of them, don't work here anymore, so.
Okay, so you're looking at section.
Sorry, I was trying to. Were we appointed those 20 people, we want them to be moved to a different step
Yes.
as effective as, so. Based on what the plus the years that they had with us. So if they left in 2013, they came back in 2015. You want them to go back to how did that work?
13. So if they left that as a year 5 medic, they would come back as a year 5 medic.
The 20 people, you want them to stay, or you want those 20 people to adjust it?
Adjusted. I'm going to have Kim talk about the language. Yeah.
Hi guys, apologies for my distance. I'll do my best to project. Let me know if you can't hear me. So we were looking at the numbers that Katie put together for us. I appreciate it being a lot easier to put everything in context. And she costed out reappointments, I think averaging at about 8 per year, at about $50,000 cost a year for the difference in pay steps for when somebody comes in as a year 0 versus if they got reappointed. Using some of the information that we got from the department based on hiring costs, we costed out how much it costs for a person to go through the BLS Academy, the overtime that is paid for them to go through the ALS Academy process. And then I added on there the minimum duration for the BLS 3 portion of our training. BLS 3 is when you're on a 3-person group. You are not filling a seat. You are not helping with any vacancies. That is for initial operations training only. The BLS Academy, ALS Academy, and I believe BLS 3 are things that are not regularly included in our reappointment process. So those are costs that are not incurred when we have somebody that is reappointed. I was pretty conservative with the numbers for the BLS 3 Academy. I did 4 weeks as like, that's the minimum somebody can be in that phase at the lowest pay possible, as like a very brand new medic coming in at year 0, medic 0. And doing so, the medic onboarding looks like it costs $12,562 between just the academy and the BLS 3 duration. The CS onboarding was $19,027 because we're including the ALS Academy. And I did not include any of the costs that we were given about having proctors in the academy, going through the whole training process, et cetera. So looking at that, I took the numbers that Katie gave us that were the difference between coming back as a year 0 medic or coming back at the appointed step. And it actually comes out as a cost savings, the training that they no longer have to receive, because they do not have to go through the multi-month training process. And they are able to come in and fill a vacancy significantly faster. I'm happy to share the numbers. I did not have them on hand to give to Selena. They're in the chat, I believe. I don't know if you wanted to bring them, but it averages out as, instead of a 50,000 euro cost or 50,000 year savings, using the numbers that you gave us for people coming back in. Just because it's significantly cheaper to bring somebody back in that has a smaller hiring process than it is to bring somebody in from the beginning.
Medic onboarding, 12,562. Clinical specialist onboarding, 19,027. And then the person who brought this language to us was Dio, the original language. Do you want to talk on it too? Yeah, please.
Yeah, and we may not have shared kind of the origins of this for why it came about. So this is not a merit thing to get people previously reappointed higher pay. This is a solution, kind of reading the chief's language that y'all brought up as far as starting people off at different pay steps. I've actually brought up what this tool could be. And so what this is a tool to help the chief go out and recruit people who have already been here. Right now, we can't do that. Even if you do putting them in like a second pay step, you can't take people who used to be tactical paramedics, spec op paramedics who left us, and then bring them back as like a year 2 pay grade. So kind of the origins of this is that we actually have someone who, if you look at like a 30-year time span and for what you have to do here to be able to retire, a 3-decade plan, you put people in positions to where they often have to give a lot of opportunities outside of life, especially if they have spouses or ill parents or ill children. All those are examples that come from this reappointment clause, to where they have to stay here for the full 30 years. So we actually had this incredible tactical paramedic who actually had to leave us for 2 years to support his wife's dreams, going into a higher branch of the medical field. And in order for him to come back, he'd already spent 5 years here, did his time, went to the highest levels here, and then when he came back, he had to restart all over again. And so all that time in service counts for nothing. And so we also have seen that with a mother who had to leave to take care of her child, come back, lost all of her seniority. So not only do we have someone that has what in our industry is called KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities. That's like what you want in someone. That's someone that you've built to have very specific knowledge, very specific skills and abilities within our workforce to make the workforce stronger. You have this group out there that has these high KSA levels, and if they have to leave to go take care of family or anything like that, they're now penalized to ever come back, because they have to come back with all their previous time, all those KSAs, not counting at all. And so what we do have, kind of through COVID and everything, is that we have a lot of people who may have left who would be willing to come back if we were to incentivize them to come back. And what this clause does, it gives the chief a tool to bring them back to where they can at least start at that pay scale. So you don't penalize them to go take care of a child, don't penalize them to help a spouse achieve their dreams, but bring them back. But the penalty comes in when they don't get to keep their seniority. So they can't get upper access to promotions or anything like that. And so this would be a tool to bring them back, acknowledge their previous time in service that they've done here. And then ultimately, it is a cost savings to the city because we're not bringing somebody back in on this like completely out the outside and having to train them. We take someone that we already have cost savings there, bring them back in, and it's a huge multiplier to the workforce. And that's kind of where it came from. The reason we put retroactive too is because the people who inspired this, they are negatively impacted. We feel like that if you put your time in here, especially going through COVID and Fury and everything, like the time that you've spent serving the citizens of Austin should have some count or have some merit to it. And that's kind of the background of it.
And so is this taken in conjunction with the chief's direct hire process as well?
It could be, right? Like in a beginning or in a bargaining situation.
Tied it together, yeah, get tied it together, so you're also looking to increase those here where they can come in at a step direct hire.
As in like someone would direct hire would get like 5 years if they've done 5 years somewhere else?
Yeah.
No, because this is specifically to the citizens of Austin. So where I come from, a rurally invested system that's 120 people, the amount of work that I did there is not comparable to the amount of work that I've had to do here as far as workload experience.
No, for sure, that's why we had left it up to the discretion of the chief.
This is saying as somebody who has worn the same uniform as us, who served the citizens of Austin, who has done the job, all they have is that time in service is at least honored when they come back.
Okay, so you want to unbundle those two concepts completely
Well, not just because the training costs are different between those two. We have somebody who
So
does not need the
priority
operation
of the
training.
chief that he had, 3 top priorities, you are now also on, got it.
I do want to say, I don't know if it's a bundle thing, but I do know in this very
It is.
specific part of this is a tool that is available.
So I believe
Clear
what
as
he's
day.
trying to do is, I don't believe it's clear as day, I think what he's trying to do is explain to you what's happening here. He's not trying to be antagonistic. Trying to get the ire of the city during the negotiations. So I think we can probably pull back a little bit and discuss what he was actually saying as opposed to what the assumption was. Saying that this is a tool to bring back qualified, highly qualified people who have been through our system, which is the city has spent money on already. Yeah, I can finish. Then they spend money on already, and they've already put some cost on this. And this is a tool that we are helping to provide that the city may have missed in their endeavors to push forward on the top 3 priorities that we have.
I don't think we missed it. This has been on the table in the subcommittees. We've been talking about this for quite some time. It was only in the last 3 or 4 sessions that we had tied them together. And I'm merely asking, you are now unbundling that, the whole concept.
I think that, just to be frank, I feel like y'all had bundled them, we had not necessarily tied them together, we were just saying that we thought that this was a thing that could help achieve the goal of bringing. Okay.
You want your language here. No changes to the permanent certification.
So for pay and seniority, you'll have put in that if they have 2 or more years of paramedic or communications experience, what we did is we still have concern with some of the subjective nature about this. We have had prior issues, they were pre-civil service, which is why we thought, why many of us wanted civil service to address some of the pay discrepancies between different paramedics of different genders. And so we tried to just take some of the subjectivity out of it, and basically say that if they had 2 or more years as a paramedic or communication respectively in a primary 911 system. So any place where the job is relatively similar to us, except for that, you know, we didn't qualify any further, but we felt like this was a good way, that we felt comfortable allowing for them to get that additional time and grade. We did not provide this seniority because, again, we still think that our department is very, very specific when it comes to operations. That we did not feel like anybody on the outside would be able to be qualified enough to train somebody from within in that fast of a timeline. I think, you know, now that we have the lateral, now direct hire language in, we have had 2 direct hire classes, one in January, one in July. The July cadets are not out yet, but what we see with the January cadets is they're very surprised at how operationally heavy this department is. And one of them has already deferred to the next ALS Academy. And we hear that from many of them, that it is an overwhelming amount of information. So I think that kind of proves what we're trying to say, which is that it is a lot. So we don't really need to move it faster than we currently have it, especially since we only have 1 class in our belt, and that's what we hear from many of them.
So even hearing that from them, you don't think that would give them any credit to be enticed by being placed in a direct step?
No, we're comfortable with putting them in a direct step, just not the seniority for tenure.
Which would also go into the seniority for promotion.
Yes, correct. And the thing is that our promotion positions are just, this is my ignorance when it comes to police and fire, but all our promotions are training and then are owning and managing ambulances for the whole communications floor. It's just the level of responsibility really does require experience in that area. Yes. So we remain generally at our previous offer, but we saw some of the creative tweaks that you'll make to the pay scale and we agree with them. And so this is our current pay proposal. And we're right now at 33.275. But I appreciate the movement that y'all made and working together and seeing some of these things that we can do.
So we will take that. Your language. I do feel that it's incumbent upon me because maybe it's been missed. But I want to reiterate what the department and the city's major goals for this contract are. You want to increase the medic to be at a minimum and where the funding is going to be. This offer does not do that. We want to authorize direct hiring of the clinical specialist communications like we did for clinical specialist field in the last contract. We want to authorize the placement of direct hires to a higher than entry-level pay salary at the discretion of the chief to enhance recruitment and hiring. For retention, we want to create an easier path to cross between field and comp We want more flexibility to test for command. And we're looking for other retention tools such as the later pay increases, which may or may not cost out depending on which route the pay scale winds up looking like. And we wanted to try to make sure that no one got less than 1%. Civilians are getting that, and regardless of whether fire, police, whatever, we know for sure that this is not, so we wanted to at least do that. I think a lot of the things Steve discussed today are a little different than we've been discussing and go to the heart of what the goals of the city are, the goal of the chief are, and it's very problematic. So I think we need to go in a group and let you know.
And, I know it's a lot and it's been 3 weeks, I think, since we presented 11 and 12. And so some of these things just have not really changed for us. And we just did have some more conversation based on your last, just because I'm really not lying, but when we saw that change, we really started interrogating how do people move through our department, through field. And so we just wanted to have a conversation about that.
I understand that. We all know promotions is a crazy article. It's very long. We have a lot of subcommittee discussions. And it's very hard to put together and not find something every time you open. Totally get that. But I think it's clear that we're not on the same page at all as far as the cities and the chiefs' main goals for this entire contract. And the reason that we are offering so much money on the table has to do with attaining the magic goals of the chief. And we may not do those things. For what you have to say. So we need to regroup and discuss. Stuff.
Rest of.
Same way. So sorry that took so long. We had to go through quite a bit. More than we'd anticipated, and I understand the motions is a crazy article, and it is worth reconsidering every time you look at it, because there's just so much there. So we're gonna go through the language with you first. In Article 6 wages, we'll have an attachment for you as well, and showing you this. So this is all the same, A through B. We have left the structure on the assignment and certification pay the same. We have taken out the stacking portion of it. And we've left it at the amounts we had, but just structurally, because these are assignment pays and they're kind of listed weird before, we did put them all in the same section and they all went to certification. So the only difference there really is that we took out the stacking. On Article 7, we do feel the need to have this not subject to the grievance process. As we stated before, we do consider this a complete breakthrough issue. This is not in any agreement that we've seen before. But absolutely willing to do it, absolutely willing to work with you, but we do feel the need, because best efforts is such a loose term and not really defined well anywhere, that we do think it should not be grievance. On Section 8, you would accept the FMLA, so that's all good for 9. Oh, yeah, we still are not accepting the buyback program as you have it. That's not in our costing model. If it comes back to the costing model, then it wasn't exactly how we wanted it. We started to work on it that way. It's not in our costing model anyway. We're not doing it. So it's worth discussing if it does come back. But we're very similar, just to be certain. So we did, in the places where we hadn't had the 90 days, just inadvertently tried to insert that there. No, that's it. Oh, that's. So you'll notice in the eligibility section for captain and for commanders, we have reverted back to the original language still, but again, okay. But again, that's part of the whole package. So the only reason we're giving up on the years is as part of the whole. So what you see here is going to be the status quo.
The first part was the eligibility on the vetted.
Yeah, we did accept that language. I think it's pretty clear in that it's, still pretty clear that it's not a duty. We talked to the chief about that and she seemed very clear. as you suppose. Okay, on the, if the candidate does not score at least a numerical 70. We agreed with you on that. And looking at it, I thought, well, that's worded really weird. And then I realized that you had taken the total points for a promotion list from the equation, basically. So we just put quotes around it so it's clear kind of what that meant. But that's the only change. So yeah, that made perfect sense. That's a very good catch. I'm glad we, after working that hard to get it that way, made it that way. So that was really good.
Hoping Matt will be here.
Oh, yeah, we did this throughout. So on the 90 days, we just added it in. We added agreed with the 70 total points. We didn't turn it green, but we agreed. We had days, as well. As well there. On page 28, we added in the 70 total points. On the revision chief. That's a deal killer for us, so it's back to our old language on that. So on the crossovers,
You have language, I just wanna, we have language about in section, new section 4. About the, we had provided some edits to this language about reimbursements.
oh yeah, we do not accept that language. We are intentionally not doing special events just because of the uncertainty of a contract reimbursement or anything else. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't, sometimes it's the county, sometimes it's the vendor. So we were not accepting that language. We resorted to our.
I had a question, but because we are, trying to keep it, staying on, it's not, it's, for us to make sure that we keep that rejected language in there to show it's been rejected as opposed to. Completely.
Yeah, we can do that.
So notice that was done on the.
Yeah, we went back to our contract because there was so much and didn't work from here, so we tried doing it. We can put that back in as a deletion. I think what we did instead here, just so that you can see it though, is I think we added a footnote stating that we deleted it. Yeah, on number 69. So that it shows that we rejected the additional language, so it didn't show it, but it shows it, if you will, just for.
Used it.
Would you be open
You
to,
can't read those footnotes that quickly.
On the planning, that's it, nice.
would you be open to, like, it says governmental entities, I just still think those are specific about those.
Then I think there is, some question whether or not the county would be appropriate, only because the payments don't always come through. We don't want to try to make things retroactively when the payment comes in. So, there's some concern. I'm not saying no for sure, but my gut reaction from our conversations is that problem. But not a hard thing.
It's not a deal breaker.
Depending on how it's written, it might be at the end of it. No, it's not. It's.
Crossover transfer.
Yeah, so. You thought about what you said about it. students. And we went back, looked at what we're trying to actually, the goal we're actually trying to attain, right? And so what we're trying to get to is to make it easier for the whole thing to happen. So that somebody can transfer and then promote or demote and promote more quickly than currently is. So what we did is we went back through here, we left the language in one, just as clarification. We put two back in. And actually, we reverted to all, you'll see a footnote here, sorry about that. We didn't cross everything out. We reverted to current language except for what you see changed. So number one was what we had changed before, but we undid a whole bunch of what we had proposed. In three, that's just the shall, Roxy tried to change that shall back to will and honor. And the other is a gender neutral. So everything here is back to current reverted language until you get down to the voluntary crossover motion transfer. And then that's just clarification language in number one. And the real change here that we think is the most important part of attaining the goal is reducing the 2 years to 1 year. Once you cross over, once you go to the other, from field to com or com to field, instead of having it either 2 years, you have to be there 1 year. So we're getting it a little bit easier to cross. I think that's it for the crossover. Anything else here? So I think everything's the same until reappointment. And then I will tell you that reappointment is the same as we had it. We did hear what y'all were talking about. We really do feel at this point the concepts are tied together for very similar reasons. What we're trying to get out of doing this on the direct hire is that you bring somebody in, that they don't feel like they're stuck in a position for too long without the ability to promote. So for both of them, you can use the seniority for promotional eligibility, not for any other purpose. We're placing them in a step, we're not retro paying anybody, and they're not getting more than 2 years now. So we've kind of tried to, back and forth them a little bit, but we do tie them together for the similar reason that if you have a good employee who wants to come back, and the chief wants, like I said, it's up to the chief, if they want them back, and if they're a good employee, then we can place them in the step. But we don't want someone intentionally, we don't want to encourage them to leave and then come back. But if they have left for some valid reason, we don't want to discourage them from coming back either. We want to make it somewhat more enticing, by allowing them to place at least in the 2 years similar to the direct hire. But for both of those, then allowing them to go in an easier fashion. So I think, say that if you go through to hiring, that is the last, I believe. Okay, and with that, we have monetary. Which most of it you've seen, it really just takes it goes back to the pay scale where the entry level is the 24, so we believe that it's coming in, where the call figures will be October 1. So not wanting, I have to catch up later on that issue, we moved that a little bit and kind of adjusted the steps in that to how we have them in our second to last proposal to make that even out. But it didn't take out the stacking. So we'll send all this over to you on that, so you can look at that. Any questions on either the language or the paper?
I think, it's 4:48, we want to continue working. And so, we want to take a caucus and check in with the team, just, we're not used to admin work. And so, like thinking about multiple days. And so I just want to check in with my team. The only thing I will say is, we've been reflecting a lot about, we said about, the priorities in the building pillars that the city has. And I think we have not, I hope that we have expressed our deal pillars. So I just want to put them out on the table again. Because we hear you, and I think we're really willing to make compromises. We hear you about the division chiefs. We already talked about in our previous offer that was on the table. We've already moved on the 2 years pay situation for incoming people. And what we heard earlier, what we didn't bring up is our also a pillar, and we worked really well together on our 26. So we do think that we are moving in that direction, absolutely. Our deal pillars are, I'm gonna pull it up so I don't say it. But we really wanted to make some movement in retirement, and we had made an inadvertent error. We thought that the 457 was on the table because y'all had costed it out last year. And then we felt like when in subcommittee that we heard that it wasn't on the table, that it would be, for whatever reason, too challenging. And so we pivoted, and we meant to put in language, and we had it in our Article 6, but it didn't make it over when we put it into your package. But basically all we did is talk about starting a committee to just look at EMS retirement issues. There's no financial tyranny, but starting a committee, we think that's a good first step to just really think seriously about retirement eligibility. But one of the things that we are asking for a financial compromise on, because we know that we can't get retirement parity with APB and AFD through the contract process. We know that we do have to work with the ledge. So we did try to come up with workarounds. One of them was the 457, which we found out was off the table. But another compromise is the 23 to 26 year step.
I'm sorry, I believe those, you go down, I believe, go to the. Last page. Yeah, so this does have 733 and 733 in the 23 and 26, so.
So, and so that's great. And so that's where I feel like we are compromised. I know the previous offer had left out the 23, and so that's what we were referring to because we hadn't seen this one.
You may not like how I shifted the steps around to get there, but we did hear you, so we put those back, so just, take a look. Yeah, we were.
So, we have 3 priorities. One of them was pay parity retirement parity. And we have compromised because we know we can't get that in this contract. So the compromise was the 23, 26 year steps. And instead of the 457, having a committee to discuss that. One of our other non-negotiables really when we started out was talking about moving us closer to pay parity with police and also especially AP comm. And I do think that in your model and our model, I know you kept saying that it didn't come close, but our model was actually showing 2420, which is virtually the same. And so we do feel like we achieved the entry level, but we really initially wanted pay parity in the whole pay scale. Fire does have a 42-hour workweek pay scale, and that's what we were putting on top of ours. And the compromise is the pay scale that we have been sending over. And so then the third deal pillar for us is we believe that we have 530 people that work in our department sworn. That is a very talented pool to promote from within. We have people that leave us that are now running, EMS for Tesla, that are emergency managers in other cities, that work, as VPs in different medical device companies. And so we know we have a lot of talent within our pool and we want to reward that performance. And so that's why we prioritize so highly those stipends that come with so much increased training. And also another reward for performance is the leave buyback program because you are committing to being here more and conserving your leave. And so I just wanted to share what our deal killers are. And we really appreciate the way that y'all have, we've looked at the pay scale and really thought hard about it. And we understand that there are financial constraints. And, we've come a long way, we think, as well. So I heard you on your parties, and we didn't want you to think that we were ignoring them. But we just also wanted to make sure you knew ours too.
So we appreciate that. Yeah, then the other thing is, and I know a lot of your members don't feel this, we feel like this is an extreme thing. We really, really do. And just because we may have put it out there earlier than we have in some of the other negotiations, a lot of what people don't see is what happened in subcommittee and where we actually started, as opposed to deciding not to do that and to talking through on an issue-based, interest-based way to get places. And I think that's what a lot of people haven't seen. And maybe we'll do it differently next time, maybe we won't. Hopefully we'll get to an agreement on this. Maybe not, maybe so, but I think the process is working. I think we both looked at each other's priorities. And it just seemed earlier that they were all thrown out the window in one fell swoop. So,
And I think we were addressing issues that had come up last time, and now we have new issues. But I mean, we had shown you conceptually what true pay parity with AFP and EPD look like, as an.
we'll argue the word true.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yes, I agree that, a lot of the work on priorities in order to get us closer was, done on screen. But let me go talk to my team for a little bit, and then I'll get back to you very soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you much. Close down those.